It's hard to imagine a kitchen without a kettle. Whether you're boiling water for tea or merely have one on your range as part of your decor, a kettle is a cooking staple. Most kettles are made out of metal, whether they're the kind that sit on a range or an electric one that plugs into a wall. But have you ever seen one that looks as fragile as this and is made out of glass? Well, they do exist, and they actually used to be pretty common. I found this at the thrift store the other day, and it is not your average kettle. It is a whistler made by the Gemco brand. And today we are going to see and hear what makes this so special. Hello and welcome to I Want to Cook. My name is Chef Matt, and yes, we have another kind of crazy thrift store find that we are going to be cooking with. This is the Gemco Whistler. Now, the name Jemco might sound familiar to you. It kind of sounded familiar to me, and in researching this, it turns out Jemco was the name of a department store back in like the 80s and 90s, I think. They're no longer around, and I don't think they're related to the maker of this kettle. If you know differently, though, let me know in the comments below. No, this kettle was made by Gemco Ware, and they made these things up until I think the 80s or 90s themselves, and then they actually went bankrupt in 2003, and their assets were acquired by a brand called Lifetime, and they still make a bunch of different kind of kitchen gear under various brands. But this guy, well, it still exists because it's right here in my kitchen. Now, when Jemco was around churning out products, they made various glass products, including the kettle, and they even did some collaborations. So this little guy, this is another thrift store find. It's a little salt shaker, and I bought it because it has the Corning cornflower logo that I love from Corningware. But this little shaker, I believe, was actually made by Jemco, and I think they did some other collaborations with Corning, Spice of Life, and some of the other patterns. So there's a little bit of interesting history of Jemco as well. They also made this little thing with one of my beloved brands, Corningware. But back to the Whistler, this was made of heat-resistant glass. That meant that it could actually be used on a range, having a flame go right under it, and an electric range as well. Now, you might be wondering, why would you want to boil water in a glass kettle like this to begin with? Aren't the metal ones fine? Well, yeah, those certainly work, and you might have one sitting on your stove. But the beauty of glass is that it leaves no taint. So when you boil water in a metal kettle, if you have a really good sense of taste, you might detect a little bit of metal. And, you know, that can make your coffee or tea or soup or whatever you're using the boiled water for just taste a little bit off. But with a glass material, well, of course, it leaves no aftertaste. Another great thing about a glass kettle is that you can see the progression of the boil. I mean, you know exactly when the water is boiling because you can see right through the material. You can see it all happening. Now, there are still glass kettles made today. Most of them are the electric type, the kind you plug into a wall and, you know, you can watch the bubbles as they come up. But there are actually some modern day glass kettles like this that sit on the range. I've seen some on Amazon. I don't know how they are, but they look very similar to this. As far as I know, though, Jemco is no longer making the Whistler. Now, this one here is at least 40 years old, and I know that because, well, this model was actually recalled by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, and it was recalled in 1984, well, because of this. This collar is made of plastic, and apparently some people would set it on the stove kind of off center, and what would happen is that would risk having the flames come up over the side of the glass and kind of melt this collar, and then, you know, you go to pick it up and the whole thing just kind of, you know, falls apart and you risk scalding yourself. They later went on to replace this plastic collar with a metal one to kind of redesign it. But I think technically this is a recalled product, but you know, I won't be using it in a way that, well, could be dangerous. Now, like I say, this is a heat-resistant glass. That means it's made out of a special material that is literally fireproof. So this is meant to sit on the range and be heated by a flame. Now, you might be wondering, well, what if you had an electric range? Well, it could work on those too, but when they were new, they actually came with a little trivet. So instead of setting the glass directly on the electric coil or whatever the range you had, you would use a trivet and you would set it on that to kind of disperse the heat. Now, of course, I don't have that trivet because I bought this at a thrift store, but that's fine because my range is gas. Now, this is a pretty cool looking kettle. I think it's got this really neat retro design because, well, of course, it's kind of old. And another interesting feature about this is that it's got little icons for the cup lines, either 6 or 8. That's a pretty interesting design. You can kind of fill the water up to there and you know how much water you have in your Whistler kettle. Okay, but the true X factor of the Whistler is that, well, it whistled. Are you ready to hear it? Let's fire it up. Okay, so I've got the Whistler heating here on a flame. This is about a low to medium, and it heats up pretty quickly. I found that for about 6 cups of water, it takes about, well, maybe less than 10 minutes, and you can see these bubbles already just kind of forming. That's the beauty of a glass kettle like this. You can see exactly what is happening, and well, it's gonna be boiling and singing in no time. The moment you've been waiting for. Are you ready to hear the Whistler whistle? And here it is, whistling away. I don't know that it's that great of a whistler if I'm going to be a whistling critic, but, well, you can definitely hear it. Okay, so once the concert is over, the way this works is you just lift off this top portion. This is the portion that whistles, and then, of course, you can just pour your boiling water into whatever application you're using it for. In this case, I'm brewing some tea. So there's a little history and a how-to on the Gemco Whistler. Definitely kind of a unique thrift store find, and I'm sure there's still plenty of them out there. You might want to look for one with the metal collar though, if you absent-mindedly are one to leave your kettles burning on the stove. Don't do that. I don't think this is going to replace the Hayden kettle that I featured a few weeks ago. That's the electric kettle that I found also at a thrift store and I bought just because I left my other kettle running on the stove and I didn't want to repeat that mistake. And no, this channel is not turning into a kettle review channel, although wouldn't that be kind of interesting for a YouTube channel? There's got to be one of those out there. Okay, trivia time. Last week I asked you to identify what this is used for, and several of you got it right. It is indeed a portafilter, and this is for use with an espresso machine. What happens is you fill this cavity with the espresso grounds, you tamp it down, you insert it into your espresso machine, and then when it builds pressure, it outputs that lovely, lovely thing that we call espresso. For this week's kitchen tool trivia, who knows what this thing is? It's not a microphone. I mean, kind of in keeping with the theme, the whistling theme of this video, it's not a microphone. It does look like one though. If you know what this thing is or you have a guess, put it in the comments below. I will of course let you know the correct answer and how it is used in the next video. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Until next time, I hope you want to cook.